Good evening everyone. So tonight we've got alcohol-free Ghost Ship going up against full-fat Ghost Ship. I'm sure other people have probably done videos comparing these two, but I was just curious myself to see what the difference was between the two. I quite like Ghost Ship as a beer, the original. So yeah, I wanted to see whether they've managed to actually do a decent low alcohol or no alcohol version of it. So yeah, let's see what they're like. Oh, and I'll also put up a clone recipe for the alcoholic version of Ghost Ship at the end as well, if you're interested. So yeah, let's check them out. Right, so Adnams Ghost Ship. It's one of those beers that has been around for a while. One of the sort of early English ales to kind of adopt the use of American hops in it. Quite a few people like to sort of shit on these kinds of beers these days and go, oh, there's not enough hops in them, blah blah blah. But you know, if you see it for what it is, which is an English ale with American hops in it rather than an American pale ale, then, or an IPA, then, you know, I think it's still quite a good beer that stands up quite well. It's more kind of copper coloured, I guess, than really pale, and that's because it's got some Crystal Rye in it, which we'll talk about in the kind of clone recipe later. As it says on the can, hopping wise, it's all Citra hops. I think there's some other stuff in there as well, but Citra hops is certainly the main flavour and aroma ingredient. Right, I did drop this one on the floor before I started, and that's why it's just exploded all over the place. Fuck, I knew I should have left it for a little while. Anyway, I'm getting slightly less of the alcohol-free version because it's soaking into my feet at the moment, but I think there's enough there for a decent taste test. So I need to make sure I remember which way round these are. Anyway, appearance wise, couldn't really tell much difference between those. These Goose Island glasses are nucleated, so it's not quite as fizzy as it's making it appear there, or it shouldn't be, but yeah, it looks really carbonated. That one was more carbonated because, as I said, I decided to throw it at the floor first. I'll start with the full fat version. So yeah, tastes like Ghost Ship. I'm quite familiar with this beer already. As I said, nice kind of citrusy bite from the hops. There's a little bit of kind of toffee caramel taste from the Crystal Rye. It's got a nice dry finish on it, but yeah, nice amount of malt in there to balance out the hops. Pretty good. So the interesting comparison now, 0.5%, but in the UK that's enough to be called alcohol free. I think I saw somewhere that apparently orange juice has a higher percentage of alcohol than that, so yeah, and it's basically impossible to actually get drunk on anything with that lower percentage. But anyway, aroma wise, very slight difference, but it's pretty close what the difference is, but there's a subtle difference there, but it is still mainly Citra hops on the aroma. Okay, if I was drinking that on its own before I tried that, I'd probably be like, that's not bad at all for a alcohol free beer. But when you literally do it side by side with the real deal, you really do know that there's yeah, mainly some missing kind of body and flavour to it. I think you do lose the hops a little bit as well because of that. Yeah, now I don't tend to drink alcohol-free beers very much at all, but I've had a couple recently and I've been, you know, reasonably impressed by how good they are. This is still quite drinkable. I'm not, you know, I don't think it's terrible at all. But yeah, compared to the original, it's definitely kind of thin and a little bit lacking in flavour. I mean, that's obviously the big challenge with an alcohol-free beer. Like I said, it's better than I would expect for 0.5% alcohol, but you're obviously going to lose something when you're taking out, you know, that element of the drink. So if I had to drink alcohol-free beer, which I very rarely do, but if I had to, that would definitely be a decent option for me. I'm trying to remember what the other one I had recently that was really good. It was another Citra one, but it had probably a little bit more hop flavour in it than this one. An interesting comparison anyway. For now, I'll definitely be sticking with the full fat version. Yeah, like I said, I like it as a sort of American hopped English ale. It's got nice flavour to it, packs a bit of a hoppy punch, and it's got Citra hops in it. You know, who doesn't like Citra hops? So let's have a little look at the recipe. I'm not going to take any credit for this one at all because it is basically pinched straight off of one of the forums. I've slightly changed it just to simplify the hop schedule. So it's mainly Citra, just with a little bit of Chinook at the beginning. It's off of Jim's beer kit, so I've forgotten who the original poster of this recipe was, but whoever it was, thank you very much for putting the recipe up there. I have brewed a version of this a while back. I don't have it on the go at the moment, but I have done a version of this before. It does come out quite well. Can't remember how close it was to the real thing, but it's worth a go. So the Ghost Ship clone recipe is 90% pale ale malt. I'm just going to give this one in percentages, so you can obviously use that to make whatever batch size you want. Carapils or light crystal malt for about 5%. UK crystal malt, don't know if it matters if it's UK or not, crystal malt 5%, and then that's it for the grist. Bittering hops, Chinook, enough Chinook at 60 minutes to give you 23 IBUs, Citra at 10 minutes to give you 10 IBUs, and then at 1 minute in the boil, enough Citra to give you about 3 IBUs, and then you'll be dry hopping with 2 grams per litre of Citra again. Now, yeast wise, the absolute best option would be to actually manage to get hold of the Adnams yeast itself, because it's a really good yeast. I managed to actually pinch some of it out of a mini keg back when they were still doing live mini kegs with the yeast in them, and it was an absolute monster of a yeast. I think it's actually a dual strain from what I understand, so it will ferments down really attenuative, good flavour, cleared down really nicely, very flocculent, and yeah, was a really good yeast, but I couldn't keep it going because it was a dual strain, so it seemed to yeah, change very rapidly when I was saving it between brews. And then the mini casks stopped being sold as live casks, so they don't put the yeast into them anymore. I believe you can get Suffolk yeast, which is a part of the Adnams strain, from one of the yeast laboratories. It might be White Labs, I think, possibly, but as far as I understand it, that's not actually the full you know, mixed strain that they use. Anyway, I digress. So you're unlikely to be able to get the Adnams yeast unless you've got some sort of connection to the brewery, or yeah, I don't think they sell anything that's kind of got live yeast in it at the moment. But you know, just get something that's quite attenuative, finishes nice and dry, obviously is quite promotes the hops, and you should be all right. So just trying to think, something like, I don't know, White Labs 007 or something like that. The London Ale Free that is used in a lot of New England IPA recipes is actually a really good yeast for this sort of thing as well. I've drunk a few beers from competition entries for the forum thing that I did before, which used that yeast, and it did a really good job. Clears up nicely, surprisingly, maybe for people who think that it's a New England IPA yeast. It's a, you know, it's a London ale yeast before it was ever used for New England IPAs. So yeah, anyway, that might be a good shout. or any kind of English ale yeast from around that region that might have some sort of shared heritage. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's the recipe. The target gravity is 1045. You're looking for an FG of about 1010, although if you get a really attenuative yeast you might end up a bit lower than that, so maybe drop the OG a few points if you think that's going to be the case. Aiming for 4.5% as per the original on the ABV, 36 IBUs, and the colour a little bit darker than a really pale ale, so again a slightly more copper-like colour on this one, so EBC of about 16. Yeah, I would go for mash temp around 66, 67ish degrees, and you should be rocking. So yeah, give that recipe a go, and hopefully if you do, it will come out nicely. Cheers.
I'm the dude, so that's what you call me, you know? That or his dudeness, or duder, or, you know, El Duderino.